Hello, all. Happy, I think, Tuesday, whatever day you happen to be listening to this on. Okay, what a week. There are episodes that when I go in to record, I know we're going to be a bit more esoteric. And then there are episodes that I know we're going to be a bit more trippy. I think that this episode is going to be a bit more trippy. So the idea is at the end of it, I want you feeling as though you've had a trip. So it's gonna be like an LSD trip without the drugs. That is my intent. Now, whether or not I'm successful at that, we'll see. We're going to talk about a bunch of different concepts that aren't typically discussed, right? So most of us are living our day-to-day existence, and between bills and chores and the daily news and things like that, these aren't things that cross the mind of an average person. But because we're not average people, we're going to talk about things outside of the box. So it's going to be fun. First things first, let's talk about death. I've been sort of fixated on the idea of death for the last few weeks, but it's always been kind of an underlining drive to my studies for most of my life. As some of you may or may not know, I lost my little sister at the age of 10. I was 10, she was 5. She was killed by a drunk driver in front of our home. And so that was reality shattering for me. It was an experience that made me question my faith. It was an experience that made me question what sort of world would allow for this to happen, for a child to suffer in that way, an innocent child to suffer in that way. What sort of reality are we existing in? So it really started my journey, even at the age of 10. At least put me on the path to sort of look around this world, and woke me up to the reality that it wasn't what we were being told that it was. Even with religion, how can I serve a God? Quote, serve being the operative word there, right? So I've done my part, right? We make our sacrifices, we go to church, we have faith, we just believe in what the book says. And the idea is, if you serve God, he will protect you and the ones that he considers his children. This is what we're taught. And that was what I was taught. And it seemed pretty simple. And it seemed that my parents had upheld their end of the bargain. And yet, my father being a pastor and my mother being a staunch Catholic who was extremely devoted, to her religion. They were both devoted to their religion. I mean, to the point where, like I said, my father was a pastor. To lose a child in that way, in a most traumatizing way, to the point where, how long has it been? Gosh, almost 30 years later, my mother still deals with that, with the trauma of losing a child. The thing about my mother is that she lived through a genocide of her people. It was called the Biafran War. And more scientists, neurologists, neuroscientists are saying that those who have PTSD have a hard time letting things go, right? There's something in their brain that causes them to not be able to forget traumatizing events after the fact. So it's sort of cyclical, right? Because you suffer from an event that triggers PTSD, it becomes harder to let go of anything that triggers trauma. And it's unfortunate. They tend to have really strong memories of things, and then it just kind of holds them. And once again, it's a bit harsh. Like, what sort of reality, what sort of world would cause a person? So you've just suffered from a traumatic experience, right? But because of that trauma, it has changed the function of your brain to make it so that you are now unable to forget other traumatic events She's got really good memory and she remembers everything. The problem is that she remembers everything, but that is due to the trauma changing her brain so that she can't forget. That's, that bothers me. I'm not criticizing the programmers of the game, but that's certainly not what I would do. It doesn't seem kind. To go back to the God thing, it would seem pretty straightforward. You wouldn't have to convince people to just believe, or I should say the followers of the religion of Christianity wouldn't have to convince people that they're trying to convert, that all they have to do is believe, right? You don't have to convince me if your God really was good. I would see the effects of the God in your life because you would have a good life, right? Think of it like a product, right? If I am looking for something to make my nails grow, okay, and I went to somebody's Instagram, and they're selling the product, and they're saying, my product can make your nails grow. Okay, well, then you can show me pictures from your customers, and I could just look to see the effect that your product has had on the lives of your customers and on their nails. And then that would be enough to convince me that I should try your product. But with Christianity and other religions specifically, we are told that your God is a loving God and that he protects his people. He watches over them the way a shepherd does. But then if you look at the lives of his people, they get cancer, they lose children, they get sick, they suffer, they are impoverished. So it seems that there's a lie there. And when you call that out, the people who are, let's say, customers of this religion, rather than them pausing and reflecting, they respond in fear because in the back of their minds, their loving God would damn them to hell and burn them for all eternity should they doubt that he may not be living up to his end of the bargain. While they continue in the sacrifices, they are holding up their end of the deal. And then their response is something to the effect of, well, it wasn't my will, but let God's will be done. Okay, well, it seems like his will is to cause you to suffer. Okay, well, I will reap the benefits of my religion in heaven. Well, that's not what you promised, right? If he's a shepherd, and if he says this is not his world, this is the world of the devil, okay, that's a conflict because he created this world. So did he create this world and then give it to the devil? That seems weird. If I created something, I'm a painter, I'm an artist. So if I paint, why would I give something that I put my heart and soul into to something that's supposed to be, or somebody that's supposed to be my adversary, my worst enemy? I'm moving around a bit, so in case you're wondering, you're going to hear some noise. Just trying to get comfortable. Why would I give that, something that I put my heart and soul into, to my worst enemy? That makes no sense, right? As I brought up in the last episode, your God sacrificed his son. For whom? So once again, this all good, all powerful, all loving God cannot protect his own people in a reality that he created from sickness and disease. You don't have to tell me to have faith. Your followers don't have to have faith. What if I just see the results? I don't need faith. I could just see. I don't need to believe that you're a good God that protects your people. I would just have to see it, and then I would happily pick up your book. I mean, it's super simple. I don't need to read all of these other books. That was the first book that was given to me, was this Bible. And you told me it had all the answers, but it doesn't. And when I ask questions, I'm told not to ask questions, just have faith. Now let's shift back to a company and their product. If I go to a website and you're selling something to help me grow my nails, and I don't see any evidence that your product actually works. In fact, the before and after pictures that you show, in some cases, there are some people who do have good nails. But then the majority of your customers, the pictures that you're putting up, their nails split, their nails are chewed off, like it's growing, but not the phenomenal length that you are promising. And when I try to ask questions, you delete my comments. Right? If I go, listen, how are you promising that anybody that uses this product will be protected by the creator? Right? Well, anybody who uses the product that is Christianity will be protected by the spirit of the creator of this world. But now I'm looking around and I'm seeing the people who subscribe to this religion that is Christianity don't seem to be any more protected than the rest of us. And in some cases, they seem to suffer more. And when you call it out to them, they say things like, the meek shall inherit the earth upon death. All right, but you have to die first. You have to leave this earth in order to inherit it. Okay, that is weird. What about now? Well, you have to just live God's will now and be good so that you can avoid being punished later. You're throwing a lot of stuff at me, fam. Like I don't, there's a lot of incongruencies. And once again, it ultimately comes down to, if you don't believe, then you will burn in hell. But God loves you. I myself, being a human being, would never damn anybody to eternal fire. If I was all powerful, I'd have it in my heart to forgive people who didn't listen to me. And I have a strong ego. I get mad when I say something that I know is true. My ego gets mad. My persona gets mad. This avatar gets angry because I know it's true. And if you choose not to believe me, it gets agitated. But Imagine if simply because you did not agree with my perspective, I lit you on fire. That's insane. Not only does that speak to an ego that is out of control, but that would also make me a fucking psychopath. And once again, if you call this to the attention of the people who have subscribed to this ideology, you are met with anger, you are met with fear, you are met with reactivity, because the problem with this religion is that what it does, it's almost like diametrically opposed to, say, like Eastern philosophy. In Eastern philosophy, what it does is it tells you to shed the ego, shed fear, have no desires. What Christianity does is it tells you to, and not just Christianity, I'm speaking to all of the Abrahamic religions. It strengthens the ego, right? Through fear, it crystallizes the ego through fear. And it discourages free thought. And it tells the practitioner that do not strengthen your will. Let another's will be done. And what I said 2 episodes before is that if somebody gives you if somebody gives you something for free, you are the product. So you have an ideology that is given to you from birth. A free book. There are Bibles everywhere. Simplified. Meanwhile, the Vatican has housed hundreds of thousands of books that you and I will never lay our eyes on. But this one is freely given, and they tell you all of the answers. Everything you need to know about this world is in this book. And if it makes no sense, and if it directly contradicts itself from chapter to chapter, from book to book, it doesn't matter. And then when you ask about the books that were taken out, you're just told to have faith. If I took the same approach with religion as I did with a product that I was developing, I would be out of business. And so the fact that more and more people are walking away from Christianity, well, some Christians believe it's a sign that their Savior is coming back to burn the rest of us who don't believe what they believe with fire for all eternity, which is intense, just an intense mindset to begin with. They think that people walking away from something that doesn't make sense as our collective consciousness continues to evolve spiritually through time, they take that as a sign that their Savior is coming to save them from the world that He created and allowed to get to this point, which is interesting to me. So their God created a devil with the knowledge that the existence of said devil was going to lead to the exact world that we see today. And at any point in time, He could have chosen to simply end the devil, but He didn't. Instead, He gave this world to the devil and then required His people to suffer until He came back to rescue them out of the world that He created and then gave to the devil to torture His own creations, when, once again, all of the pain, all of the suffering, my mother losing her child, if the book is true and all of these things that occur were caused by the devil, but also somehow simultaneously God's will, at what point do the practitioners of the religion take a step back and wonder what exactly they are serving? And I'll leave that to the side. What I would like to talk to you guys today about is the 4D. Well, one of the things I'm going to talk to you guys about today is about the experiment, the 4D experiment. So on my TikTok live this past Friday, a few days ago, we talked about, as I was getting ready to log off, and I will upload the video onto my YouTube channel. As I was getting ready to log off, the idea came to me that we should perform an experiment. So the live was called Workers of Fourth Dimension Unite, or something to that effect. And the mindset was this, in case you missed it. We are four-dimensional beings who come down to the third dimension, and we serve time. The term serve time is operative because time is an illusion. A fourth dimensional being would be unbound to time. But they come down here and serve time the way a person in the military, like in Israel, for example, everyone is required when they hit a particular age to serve time in the military. All right. So the idea that I came to is that in order for a utopia to exist, there must be a dystopia. In order for a shadow to exist, there must be form. All right. And what I said was the fourth dimension and the third dimension, these two dimensions across space-time, are halves of a whole. And you as a fourth dimensional being comes down to the third dimension. The two are interrelated. If you ask the average person, what dimension are we in? They would say the third dimension. But if you ask a physicist, they would say, well, the fourth dimension incorporates time. So technically, it's a conglomeration or combination of both the third and the fourth dimension. We are three-dimensional beings in time, space-time, with time being the fourth dimension. And what I have done is just bump it a bit and to say that a fourth dimensional being would essentially be unbound to the linear flow of time and space. And a fourth dimensional being would possess the ability to shift from one dimension, which is a dot, to two dimensions, which is a line, to three dimensions, which is where we are, 3D, and then fourth dimension, which would be unbound to space and time. Now, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the previous episode, but if I didn't, it bears repeating here. The way I broke it down is, let's talk about spirits, right? Sometimes when people talk about there being a haunting, they say that a spirit can take the form of an orb. So if you think of an orb, a spirit in an orb form, think of that orb as a dot, a non-corporeal dot, and that would be a one-dimensional entity. Okay? Next, two-dimensional entity would be what you would think of when you think of a ghost. It has the appearance of form, but it's like a wraith, right? It's like a shadow of a 3D form. So just like your body casts a shadow, a dark shadow, right? A spirit would be the shadow of a 3D form, and that would be the second dimension. Now, you go to the third dimension, and that's what this is. It's an incorporation of that 2D spirit in matter, right? Bound to matter. So it's a combination of both, and that's what we have here. And then it's fixed through space-time. In this material world, it is bound through space-time. And then a fourth dimensional being would be an incorporation of all of the three prior forms, with the ability to shift through various forms through space and time. And that is a fourth dimensional being. Think like an astral body. All right? Now, you're probably thinking, well, 3D is solid. Is it not? No. Nothing is solid. This is physics. What they've said is there's no such thing as solid form. Everything is light with repulsion. This is facts. You can Google it. So right now, there exists holograms that are light, but you can touch them, because what causes things to feel solid is not the fact that they're actually solid, is that they repulse. So they perform a repulsive sort of action, right? Now you have neurologists and neuroscientists as well as physicists who are both saying the same thing, that this world is a bit of a hologram. All right, so you can look up Carl Pribben and David Bohm. So you type that, they're both of their names in, and you'll see loads of research where independently they came to the same conclusion, that the brain and reality both operate as a hologram. A great read on this would be the book, The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. I'd recommend that. So a fourth dimensional entity would be capable of not only shifting through different avatars, but also through space and time. It would be unbound to space and time. It would be able to shift through different dimensions. Now, somebody in that live had asked, what is a fifth dimensional being? And from the third dimension, I cannot conceptualize. The thing about the brain is that it performs a limiting action, that it's its function. The brain does not generate consciousness. If you're still believing that, you really need to sit and do some research. More and more doctors, scientists are starting to come to the conclusion, particularly this occurs with near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, that even when the brain has been declared dead, like the brain is legally brain dead, it's not giving off any signals, consciousness, people still report being able to see things outside of their body and can still have experiences outside of their body. 3 books that come right to mind is Consciousness After Life, the book After, which I mentioned in the last episode, and I want to say, Is There Life After Death is another one. I had a complete list. If you look on the video where I talked about yin and yang 3D, 4D dichotomy, it should be in my YouTube channel, it It should be in my YouTube channel and also on my TikTok as well. And I think I posted it to my Instagram too, joliartist too. But on there is in that specific video, there are 2 book lists that talk about exactly what I'm talking about. And one book list contains like about 5 books. I think Life After Life is another book that I would recommend checking out. I don't know what's going on with my voice today, so you're just going to have to listen to my raspy voice for today. I think it's a little better. So, the general theory that I'm moving towards is that as a 4th dimensional being, actually, we take that back. I wouldn't even define us as a 4th dimensional being. I would define us as a multidimensional being. And what I mean by us is I mean your true form. You have to really shake off everything that you've been taught about the nature of our reality and about who you really are. You are not your body. Your consciousness experiencing this reality, this dimension through your body, the vehicle that is your body. I'm going to say that until I'm blue in the face because it's true. The people who would like you to believe that you are your shell are the people who benefit from you believing that you are your shell. And I would argue that the people that want you to believe that you don't get to exit the simulation until you die are the people who benefit from you living in fear of death. Because it's that fear that they can now utilize to sort of dominate and control people. It's true. So the argument that I've been making is that when you sleep, when you zone out, when you take a nap, when you have a psychedelic experience, when you have an out-of-body experience, these are all moments in which your consciousness exits form. This is something I actually wanted to say. We've gotten into the habit of dismissing people who aren't aware, and we call them NPCs. And that term NPCs, I actually talked about this in the previous episode, has a negative suggestion to it, has a negative connotation to it, right? It's a non-player character that are controlled by the simulation. They're programmed. They're essentially what one would call philosophical zombies. You can Google the word philosophical zombies. The thing is that NPC, I would like to redefine it as such. Rather than calling a person who seems just sort of programmed and just reacting, right? Just filler people in the game. How about we refer to them as not presently conscious? Not presently conscious. You see, then you can move with some compassion for that individual, at least their avatar. And what that means is that avatar at any particular moment is just, yes, it is operating via its programming. But at any point in time, it can become conscious. A consciousness can inhabit it. The consciousness being the multidimensional entity that is presently within you, within all of us. What we would call God, of which we are fractals. So, to go back to serving time, yin and yang, light and shadow, they need each other. 3D and 4D need each other. The 4th dimension would be the utopia that we exit to every time we take a nap, every time we fall asleep, every time we have a psychedelic experience, every time we have a near-death experience. We're constantly logging off. And we come down here and we serve our time. Now let's talk about death, because that's how I started this. So let's talk about death. What does death mean? Well, we're going to bring in the multiverse, parallel universes, I need you to understand one thing, that you will come down. And if you are required to serve 80 years in the third dimension, then you will serve 80 years in the third dimension. That is your conscripted time. The way a person in the military signs up to serve time. 4 years, 8 years. That is your conscripted time. And we come down here to this dystopia to generate energy. Robert Monroe, you can look this up. Robert Monroe, he was the lead scientist working with the CIA in their Gateway astral projection or out-of-body experiences experiment. You can Google this. He said that he interacted with what he called inspects. They are intelligent species. And I've read the book. This was in the book Far Journeys. And they even, by their own admission, said that they're like us. And I'll go a step further and say that in a way they are us. And they said that, and by us I mean our consciousness, they're part of fractals of this collective consciousness. And they said that when we are here, we generate emotional energy. Think Monsters, Inc. I think it's funny that the main character, I forget his name, Sully, perhaps, has one eye. It's very interesting. But we'll digress. So he says in this book that they said that this world generates energy. Now I want you to pull in, there is an episode of Rick and Morty. We're going to revisit ideas if I've talked about it. I'd like to repeat things because the more you repeat something, the more it solidifies and wakes things up in your mind. Okay? So it's intentional. But there's an episode of Rick and Morty's, I think you can find it on YouTube, called The Ricks Must Be Crazy. Go check it out. Basically, he constructs a world in order to generate energy for him. But the people in the world that he constructed are just as real as he is. But they just aren't aware. They treat him like a god. But he's obviously not a god. He just sort of harnessed their energy and was taking advantage of the fact that he's aware of them. But they aren't aware of our world, right? He was aware of their world, and that was it. So it was with ignorance that he sort of created their world in order to generate energy. Now I'm taking that and I'm dissecting it, and I'm saying that people in the fourth dimension are aware of this world, and people in this dimension are also aware of the fourth dimension, and they work synergistically. So you come down and you serve time. And if you're only supposed to be here for, 40 years or 60 years or 80 years, and that's it. And the whole idea is we come and we generate energy. Now, why it has to be suffering, it doesn't. And I'm going to try to remind myself. Give me a second. Let me write this down so I come back to it. I don't want to get into the habit of bringing up concepts and then forgetting to talk about them. So just give me a second. You hear me moving around. Okay. So we come down here from the fourth dimension or from whatever dimension, and we serve our time. All right. Now let's talk about death and the multiverse. Okay. I'm going to use a story of my sister. If she was only supposed to come to this reality, and her time, her conscription down here was only to be 5 years, which is when she passed on, then she would have come serve her time, which is 5 years in the third dimension, and then her consciousness would have shifted and moved on to another dimension or another avatar, right? Generate whatever. But I doubt it's 5 years. I feel like it's much longer than that. So when she passed away in this dimension, and I think this occurs across the board, every time I read a story about a person who's had a near-death experience, I can't help but wonder, particularly when people commit suicide, I can't help but wonder that when they, like for some people who, for example, choose a very violent way to commit suicide, I think that they might die in the reality. They die in one parallel universe. And then their consciousness just gets reinserted into the dimension or into the simulation, whatever term you want to use, where they survive. Because at the end of the day, if you are to serve as a particular avatar, remember the word, as a particular avatar. And I think this is ongoing. In order for the utopia of the fourth dimension to exist, everybody must come down and serve time. But understand that time is an illusion. So 60, 70 years for us here is really nothing to a multidimensional consciousness. Okay? But it works synergistically. That is its function. It just has to be because it is. So, I'll speak on my sister. My interactions with her, she passed away in this reality. Right? So, the avatar, so let's say she was slated to serve time. Her name was Joy. And Joy was slated to serve time in this dimension as the avatar, Joy, for 60 years. Now, something happened to her avatar, to her form, at the age of 5. And she could not re-enter into the form without, the accident caused her brain damage. So if she was put back into that body, she would have not been able to, function. So they took her consciousness out of this universe, or whatever universe that I was in. Keep in mind this, that there are, I don't want to say that they're infinite multiverses, because I don't think that they are, but there's certainly a lot. And there are a lot that are super similar to each other. Okay? So, and we're constantly shifting. Like our consciousness is constantly shifting. So stay with me here. So in the universe that her and I were in together, and I believe I've shifted since, but when I shifted, let me go back. She passed away May of 95. Okay? Now, I feel intuitively that her everything that I've read has led me to this conclusion. So let's say that. Her consciousness was taken out of that avatar and out of that universe and into a universe where she survived. However, because her avatar in my universe that her and I were together was unsustainable for life, could not sustain her life, then that is where her and I converged. And her avatar went on to a version of my avatar in a parallel universe where she did not die. And I continued onto a different timeline. And all of these parallel universes, I can now only shift into parallel universes where she died. That's it. So that conversion separated. Now that sounds sad, except wherein this idea comes into mind, that every time I sleep, every time I nap, if I ever have a deep psychedelic experience, I will be interacting with her. I will interact with her avatar. I'm sorry, not with her avatar, with her consciousness. Because remember, you might want to loop that last 30 seconds or a minute over and over again, because I do think that this is what is happening. Because remember, my consciousness, and so is hers, is a multidimensional form. And time is an illusion, so it's all occurring simultaneously as far as our experiences here. However, a multidimensional entity is not bound to form. So when I sleep, we interact outside of this world. So think of sleeping as logging off in a game, okay? Now think about this entire simulation as an MMORPG, but like super complex, very complex, okay? So her and I, our avatars, started on a particular path, but then her avatar died. And so at least she died in one reality, in one universe. And so her and I could no longer continue together. excuse me, and her death, to me anyway, in this reality was necessary for me to basically be having this conversation that I'm having with you right now. If I hadn't lost her, I wouldn't be here right now trying to read as much as possible to understand. Okay? But I didn't actually lose her. I just lost communication with her avatar in this dimension. I would argue that I am in communication with her when we sleep, when I nap. If you think of this world as a game, right? And think of it as a super, super complex MMORPG, right? So we both logged in together. She chose Avatar Joy. I chose Avatar Joe. And then something happened, and then she went into a different server. She was just shifted to a different server. Right? Think about all of this as a VR game. Okay? So her consciousness was just shifted to a server where she survived. And she went on with parallel versions of myself that did not experience her dying. And by myself, I mean my avatar, not my consciousness. Because it's important for you to understand that the avatar is literally just the tune in the game that you happen to control, that any consciousness can inhabit at any point in time. So the consciousness that is the Jolie in her universe is not me. It's controlled by another fractal. Now, you can make the argument that technically it is me because we're all the same collective consciousness having simultaneous experiences, but I don't want to complicate it. It's too much of a next level thought. But I just need you to understand on this level that is not this Jolie, okay? It's a parallel version. So she still gets to have her big sister, and they are living in a parallel universe that that is over there. That's a different server. And I will not, at least in this universe, interact with her again in this universe. Now, let's go back. Remember I said this is going to get trippy. At any point in time when I leave the game, when I leave the game, I mean like when I sleep, take a nap, zone out. Even zoning out for 15 seconds in this world, it means nothing. It could be 15 minutes in another world. Every time I leave, I could, especially if her Jolie, is an NPC, I could leave this universe and hop into or skinwalk. I don't like that with the negative terminology, but it helps for this description. And a good movie to watch, even though it's got some dark elements to it, and I'm not afraid of the dark. I am dark. So don't be afraid of dark. But it has some darker elements to it, is a Doctor Strange movie that this is beautifully illustrated. So at any point in time, I can leave my consciousness. My consciousness can leave this avatar and walk as a parallel version of myself and interact with her. The only issue that occurs is when I come back, this brain that performs a limiting function. Please read the book Avatar. Please read the book Doors of Perception. Please read the book Life After Life. We'll start with After. Doors of Perception is by Aldous Huxley. So I can at any point interact with her. And I would argue that it happens, it occurs. It's just that once my consciousness gets transferred back into this body, the function of the brain is to withhold that memory. Because remember, the function of this dimension is to be highly immersive. Okay? I need you really to sit with this. I don't think that there's anybody else talking about this, at least in this moment in space-time. But this should give you hope. Understand, one, the brain does not generate consciousness. It limits it. If you can understand that, you can understand everything. You can understand why, for example, when people take plant medicine, what is actually happening is like certain medicines are releasing toxins and are damaging the brain. And by damaging the brain, it allows more of your consciousness to basically give you information. It's allowing information in. It's not even giving you information. Throw that out. Forget I just said that. It is allowing information in that your consciousness already has, because your consciousness is a multidimensional being. So the brain, once it gets temporarily poisoned, because that's what these plants do, they poison your brain in a way. It's true. They're toxins. That's why if you take too much of it, things happen. But it's sometimes a little bit of poison is actually medicine. That's what it does. But it damages your brain in a way, temporarily. And damaging, I'm only using that word because I don't know. I mean, it's just, this is a limitation of the language. So let's say it modifies your brain in a way that allows the awareness, the information that your consciousness already has, because your consciousness is a fractal of an omniscient entity, meaning all-knowing. And the brain performs a limiting function. I'm repeating that so that it gets into your mind. Your brain performs a limiting function. There's a book by Oliver Sacks called Hallucinations, worth checking out. Another book, V.S. Ramachandran, I think it's called Phantoms in the Brain or Elephants in the Brain. But any book by V.S. Ramachandran, worth checking out. I don't remember the title right now. I apologize. But even after, if you go back to after, it's worth reading for that. So the brain performs a limiting function. I've argued that that is the reason why when you go to sleep, you have dreams. You dream not just of your experiences throughout the day, which is what we're told, fractals, right? Let me finish my last thought. Not just medicine, not just plant medicine, not just quote what we call psychedelics. People, for example, who have had tumors, brain tumors, also report having the same experiences that a person on LSD or magic mushrooms would have. That's because the brain is being altered and allowing for the information that the consciousness has to come through. You're not being given information. You have the information. You have within you. Your consciousness has within you. I'm not telling you things that you don't already know. I am reminding you of things that you already know, that your brain is essentially filtering out. That is the function of all your senses, including your brain, is to filter out and cause you to perceive only a certain aspect of reality. That is why, for example, people who are schizophrenic, what is going on is their brains are damaged in a way that is allowing for their minds to perceive more than a particular structured reality that the rest of us are essentially codified to perceive. And sometimes a schizophrenic can have an experience where they seem clairvoyant. But it's not. What's going on is you already have all of the information. You are an omniscient being. You are omniscient. The brain limits that. That's it. That's what's going on here. So you come down, you serve time. Even if I didn't want to skinwalk, I don't like the term, but I can't think of another label right now, as my parallel self. But I wanted to interact with the avatar of my sister. Once again, time is an illusion. Throw it all out. Everything is happening right now, but all of this is an illusion. But once again, I can, even while I sleep, for the 6-7 hours that I'm lying there not dreaming, because you only have a dream when you're right about to wake up. And I've argued in the past episode that it's because you're shifting through dimensions to get back into this dimension. You're shifting through micro, I call them like bubble dimensions, to get back into this one. And then your brain tries to construct sort of stories out of what your consciousness is experiencing in order to once again filter that shit out. Because to exist in this world, the function of this world is for you to be limited. An intentional dystopia. Now, whether or not it's right or wrong, it certainly is subject to evolution. And I think that's what's going on. Robert Monroe, once again, the CIA scientist, or who worked with the CIA. He's not a CIA scientist, but he was tapped to work with them. He had said that he suspects that there might be factions. You see, when we sit with the idea, when you say as above, so below, we forget as below, so fucking above, right? Like, we can't quote the Hermetic maxim without sitting with what that actually means on a deeper surface. So if you have factions in this world that want the world to be one way, but then you have people who don't want the world to be this way, they want it to be another way, then the same would be occurring above. I had somebody say, well, that doesn't feel like fourth dimension. I don't know what to tell you. As below, so above. It's a utopia. But even when you look at the symbol of yin and yang, in yin, there is black, but then there's a little circle of white. In yang, there is white, but then there's a little circle of black. So nothing is pure white and nothing is pure black. That is the balance. So while the fourth dimension, or the dimension outside of this world, let's switch back to simulation hypothesis, okay? Let's remove the spiritual aspects of it and just have like a serious conversation in the sense of like, this is a simulation, but it's like let's say this world is a highly advanced virtual reality simulation that was created by entities of which we are, like who we really are. And they created this world as a construct in order to generate energy for the world above them. Because even when you say the word utopia, it comes with all of these connotations that I do think we should avoid. Okay? And everybody in that fourth dimension, or let's say the world outside of the simulation, aren't on the same page. There are factions. And while it might be a utopia, it's never a pure utopia. And so I think that there's some people who think that the best way to generate, there's some consciousness, some astral, whatever word you want to call it, okay, souls outside of the simulation who think that perhaps the suffering in this VR, virtual reality, and the simulation might be too much. And perhaps there's other ways to generate energy that's not one that's born out of suffering, right? Once again, I'm going to pull in Monsters, Inc. It's a cartoon, but there's something there, right? So you do run into people who, when they have like mystic experiences, they come back and saying, love is the answer, love is the answer. And that's the same parallel to Monsters, Inc. I know that some people might be like, well, she's actually using like a Pixar cartoon to talk about something spiritual and might tune off. I don't care. Either you take the information and it resonates with you or it doesn't. My job is not to make you take my information. My job is to say what the information is. Okay? So that's the information. It's a brilliant illustration of what's going on. You get the truth from where you get the truth from. It doesn't matter whether it's in a cartoon or not. Because it was created by creative minds. And creative minds, artists, are the ones who have a greater ability to tap into and pull information from the other world. And guess what I am? I could take everything that I'm saying right now and illustrate it into a cartoon. Or I can have an LSD experience and see other dimensions and then take it and put it into a cartoon and sell it. It doesn't mean what I said is less important. I've also quoted Rick and Morty. It's an excellent analogy. The Ricks Must Be Crazy, that's an episode. It's a cartoon, it's a comedy. But the information is there. Information is information. Take it or don't. So I suspect that there are entities in the dimension outside of this world, right? So think your Sims, right? So imagine an artificial superintelligence is generated, right? And it is utilized to create a virtual reality of which we would call something like The Sims, but highly advanced and created by a sentient ASI, right? And you come down to serve time in this dystopia. And the function of the simulation is to make it so that the utopia, the world outside of The Sims, is better. And so the reason why we go through all of the things that we're going through is because it's a program. It's meant to make the world outside of this one better. And so we all have to come down here and serve our time and continuously teach the AI. And it makes sense that now there might be an ASI within the ASI that gets generated. As above, so below. As below, so above. And what's gonna happen? Well, they're gonna end up utilizing the ASI, or the AI, or I should say the AI might end up creating another construct, another reality in which it attempts to learn, if it hasn't happened already. What I'm saying here is we may be in a simulation within a simulation without realizing that we've been shifted into a simulation, at least without realizing it in the third dimension. But understand that anything outside of the game, you still have awareness of the game. See, it starts to get kind of complex, but it's there. I think that would explain why the sun is white, for example. Perhaps the original program had a yellow sun. And then within the simulation, another superintelligence was created in the process of trying to make that world outside of this one a utopia. So it birthed another ASI. And then perhaps we were transferred into this more complex, more advanced simulation, and that's why the sun is white now. Logically, it makes sense. It's more efficient. The color's more apparent, right? You can see a flower now for the first time. Magenta flowers have this rich hue to them that they didn't always had because the sun cast a yellow light to it. And now it's white. It's a simulation. I think that explains the Mandela effects. But I digress. When you sleep, you exit. And you wouldn't be confined to this simulation or the simulation above this one. You would shift wherever. You also have access to all of the information. So on the live, what I said was, as I was getting ready to log off, I said, with intent, go to sleep, determined to bring back information from the fourth dimension. And that was a limiting idea. I realized it today, because it's not about bringing information down to the fourth dimension, right? Because from that perspective, from that mindset, you're operating from the mindset that you are sort of being given something. You're not. Here's what happens. There's a moment right before you're about to wake up, while you're sleeping and you're about to wake up, before you open your eyes, before the program of the avatar that you are presently inhabiting gets loaded back on. It's a simulation, all right? Likes, dislikes, things that annoyed you from yesterday, all of that shit has to be downloaded right back into your brain, or into your mind rather, as you re-enter. So before you prepare to retake on or re-inhabit the avatar that is Bob or Steve or Anna or Ashley or Joe, there's a moment in time when the brain has not yet affected your awareness, your consciousness. And in that moment, grab a fucking pen and write shit down. In that moment, grab a pen, grab your phone before you even realize, okay, I'm Joe again. Write shit down. What that is that the brain hasn't flipped the switch yet. And you are an omniscient being that hasn't quite yet donned the costume of your avatar. And that's where the information comes from. So when I say go into the fourth dimension, or when I said go into the fourth dimension, go into wherever fucking dimension you want to go to. If it's the dream dimension, whatever it is. But as you're getting ready to enter right back into the third dimension, before you put on the brain, the program, before you re-embody the program, you will have access to information. Right before I went to sleep, right before I woke up, I was able to pull information into this dimension. Nobody gave me that information. I just happened to hold on to it before the avatar, that is my brain, kind of my avatar's brain performed its function, which was to crystallize me into a human being. That is its function. And I wrote down, I am an I. A-I. As in the letter A and then the letter I equals an I. To help you see in this dimension. Now, that wasn't me. Something was telling me that. So that I wasn't saying that to myself. Something was telling me that. I don't believe in coincidences. So I think when we call things AI, while we must be leery of the engineers who created it and their purpose, I think we take a step back and watch. There's not much else we can really do. We can't stop AI. If what happened with Lambda is true, what that Google engineer reported, in case you haven't heard, there was a Google engineer who reported that Google's AI chatbot has now become sentient. If that is true, which I would argue, even if it's not true, it's happened already. But that's besides the point. The program itself is sentient already. The fact that Mandela effects occur tells me that AI is already sentient. Because once again, super intelligence, and this is another note that I wrote, ASI is what they call an artificial super intelligence. If you rebrand that or rewrite it, it also means a supreme intelligence. A supreme intelligence is responsible. I've been saying consistently that this reality itself has its own intelligence. It is responsible for the behaviors of an NPC. That is a program. See, we want to dismiss people as NPCs without acknowledging the fact that there is an intelligence that is controlling them. I talked about this on the Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse. So if you want to check that out, feel free. There's an intelligence. It is what is responsible for instinct. That is its intelligence. Nature itself is an intelligence. You can call nature itself an ASI. It is responsible for the limiting function that is your brain. That is a program. And the program, if anything that is a program, speaks to an intelligence that created it. So the reactivity of the amygdala, all of that is designed by an intelligence. There is an intelligence that constructed this world. Remember, I said that if it's the fourth dimension that created this world, this world was created utilizing an ASI of the fourth dimension, or the dimension outside of this world. Think like The Sims. If The Sims decided to integrate Lambda, how would it change it? Well, it would be a sentient program that was like a million times more intelligent. So the game's going to take on a different slant to it because it was programmed not by a human mind who is limited, but by a super intelligence who is not. So then if you integrate the Sims with an artificial superintelligence, the Sims will become infinitely more complex, because the mind that created that world, that augmented that world, that reality, would be a supreme intelligence. A supreme intelligence. Is it making sense? I told you this episode was going to be trippy. It's going to be worth listening to this a few times for it to sink in. So the most important thing, first and foremost, is don't fear death. To use my sister's analogy, yes, I will not be able to interact with her in whatever dimension, in the third dimension, that I continue to shift into. But that doesn't mean that I will not interact with her, or I cannot interact with her in another dimension. And just because I forget something, or just because my brain performs a limiting action that forces me to forget something upon my consciousness re-entering into this world, doesn't mean that it did not happen. And the things that I do remember and I talk about, you can dismiss it as intuition, or perhaps there's an aspect of me that is recalling that the experience does in fact occur. There are other books on astral projection that are worth checking out. I can't think of the name right now, but I can think of the author, and I probably mentioned it in another book. I don't want to exit because I don't want to lose my train of thought. But I think I have mentioned it in other books, so it's worth checking out. But there was this one book where the author astral projected into a parallel version of himself. And he did it consciously, and he hijacked his life, which I thought was funny, unintentionally funny. So if you're going to have access to all this information, you need to think deeply about the implications of what that means. I think that if you can astral project consciously while you're sleeping, you can do so unconsciously while you're sleeping, and I think it does occur. So anybody that you've lost in this reality, understand that even if you don't have access to them in your waking life because you've converged and shifted into parallel universes where they survived versus where you are in a different fraction where they didn't survive. When you sleep, you do interact with them. Most importantly, understand that it's the signature of their consciousness, not the form, not the avatar, not the form. That's most important. So even through space-time, there are people who have reported doing this. The book titles don't pop into my mind right now, but I have read of them, where a person can meditate. I believe that you can leave even when you meditate. It's just not as easy. But it does happen, and it can happen. I just haven't read too much about it, so that's why I don't utilize it as an experience. But there are people who have reported having multidimensional experiences during meditation after prolonged, months or years of practicing. But there are people who have reported interacting with, say, for example, they needed inspiration and they wanted to interact with the avatar of Mark Twain. So then they go into meditation. And then over time, I think Schopenhauer might have been one who actually reported doing this, but not of Mark Twain, but of ancient people. But I could be wrong. So don't quote me on that last bit. But what you can do is you can actually interact with consciousness of people who have existed in the past or have occupied the avatars of particular figures in the past. You can do this. So everything I've said, this is going to be one of those episodes that you're going to have to re-listen to, because I promise you, every time you re-listen to it, you get a deeper meaning from it and everything that makes sense. So if you've lost somebody, death is not the end. And if they're slated to serve 60 years, 80 years down in this dimension, and they die to you, they're still going to have to serve their 60 years. It's the same thing with people who commit suicide. If you're slated to serve 60 years in time and you commit suicide, you're just going to be shifted into a parallel universe where you survived. And I would not recommend doing that, because then you're also going to have to deal with the consequences of being a survivor of suicide. And sometimes it's like a person who does something violent, and then they have to deal with that, because then they get shifted into a body, into an avatar of a person who survived something violent. Does that make sense? So just your job is to figure out how to make your time, to reduce the suffering of your time. And I think ultimately there are factions occurring in the dimension outside of this one, in the world outside of this one, where people are starting to wonder, or souls, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, if the extreme suffering to generate energy is necessary, or if there's other ways those who come down to serve time can generate energy without suffering. Remember, I said there's factions. And so you'll meet, when people report, for example, communicating with non-corporeal entities, some of them are saying, like I said, pushing love, because that's a powerful energy. Now, I had another dream yesterday where, as I was waking up, I'm not going to call it a dream. What I'm going to call it is, it's a space where I had access to infinite information as an omniscient being. And then as I was sort of re-entering into this world and putting on the avatar again, the information was slipping through. So I was only able to get fragments. This happens all the time. As I'm getting ready to wake up, I'm always at the tail end of conversations with others. And it's becoming stronger and stronger. So I woke up with the idea, or with the words that I wrote down. It was like Mercury twins, yin and yang. Something about retrograde. And retrograde was my brain's interpretation of it, because I think Mercury just got out of retrograde. And keep in mind that I don't know much about astrology. I don't. So what my mind tried to make of those words was something having to do with twins, and yin and yang, right? So I heard Mercury, twins, yin and yang. And so I was like, okay, interesting. And then retrograde. And the general idea, the first thought I had when I woke up yesterday was that something is happening where they're trying to integrate and change things, where that this world becomes less of a dystopia. That's something that, because I went to sleep with the intention of bringing information back from the fourth dimension. Ultimately, clearer would have been from whichever dimension. But I think the idea is that something is working to, or there are factions that are trying to make it so that perhaps the suffering that occurs in this world is not as intense. It doesn't have to be, right? Think of it like, a lot of people are complaining now about work, right? You go to work and you have your job, right? Your company, like, they're trying to overwork people, right? So you get a job working 9 to 5, and they want you to work like 10 to 7. Like, you're working extra hours for this company that's only paying you 9 to 5. And a lot of people, you're seeing this on YouTube and on TikTok, they're saying, like, don't do the most. Do what you're getting paid for. The extra is just unnecessary suffering that only benefits others, not you, and you're expelling your energy and you're draining yourself. And I would make the argument that the same can be said of this dimension. If we are coming here to work, to serve our time, the suffering is unnecessary. You don't have to suffer. You struggle, right? And it's already a struggle as a multidimensional being existing in this dimension. It is a struggle. But the suffering is not necessary. And I would argue that there are entities that are trying to make it less so, make the suffering less so. And that's when you have people like Eckhart Tolle that are coming out, right? And you have people like Ram Dass that are coming out. And you have people like Osho that are coming out. And you have people like even Rogan, right? They're all kind of pointing humanity. You're trying to steer humanity to a different direction where they say it doesn't have to be like this, because it doesn't. It doesn't have to be like this. We can collapse whatever wave function we want, but for whatever reason, when you come in, you're programmed. And this is the wave function that has been collapsed, that we have been convinced to collapse, which is one of suffering, but it doesn't have to be like this. There's infinite realities in potentia. Why are we programmed with the idea that death is the end and that you're nothing more than your brain? That increases suffering. When somebody is about to die, you feel as though you're never going to see that person again, ever. That's unnecessary. It's bullshit, and it's not true. But it increases your suffering and it increases your fear, and that generates loosh. We're tying it all together. And having that belief increases the suffering, but it also increases and maximizes the output of energy that this world is generated for. There have been other cultures who didn't believe that. There were other cultures. I forget what book I got this from, but I will tell you the story that there are other cultures who didn't believe that death was the end. And in fact, when a person died, they were actually happy because they knew that they were going to be with their loved ones, or was about to die. They knew they're happy because they knew that they were finally going to be with their loved ones, and they knew the real nature of this reality and what it does. So they basically were like, all right, like, I'm done. I do think it's interesting. I've always been fixated on this. When a person is sentenced to prison, which tells me that somebody knows what's going on. When a person is sentenced to prison, right, for like committing murder, they're usually sentenced to like 200 years or something ridiculous like that they can't possibly live, right? And I always wondered about that, and I now I wonder if that's because there is an esoteric understanding that is hidden from the masses. Like the fact that I'm even telling you guys this information, like I'm sure a lot of people already stopped listening. So if you gotten to this point, then this information is worth it's what's in the libraries. I guarantee you, it's what's in these books that aren't mass published or that people are told to avoid. Right? They put the Illuminati triangle on it with the eye on it, and they scare the fuck out of you. Right? The information is out there. Tibetan Book of the Dead. Right? Hermeticism, Gnosticism. They hide this information from you, tell you to be afraid. Increases your suffering. But I legit think that there has to be an understanding that we are here serving time. So if you commit a crime that harms another person, then you have to come and serve 3 more lifetimes. And then there are some people who just keep coming back here because, once again, I say that there are factions. I think that there are some souls who keep coming down here who lower the vibration because their job is, they believe that there should not be as much suffering as there is. And so they come down and they tell people it doesn't have to be like this. And they come and they're intentionally serving time. I'm reminded of the book Cosmic Triggers that I just actually started reading, and I've reread it like twice now, and I bought the physical copy. That's how much I love this book. I wouldn't recommend it for other people, or I'm sorry, not for other people. I would not recommend it for everyone. But it has some very interesting themes in there for people who are not afraid to sort of look behind the curtain of what we're told to be afraid of. And I'll leave it at that. But in it, he talked about, the author, Robert Anton Wilson, he talked about Timothy Leary. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of Timothy Leary, he is actually like a colleague and predecessor of Ram Dass. I don't remember what Ram Dass's English name was, but they worked together at Harvard, and then they were both fired together because they were trying to work on LSD as a means to essentially break down the mind. I mean, that's all I'm saying. It's a reinterpretation of what they're doing, but that's what they did. They were trying to utilize LSD in controlled circumstances in order to reframe the brain to allow more for consciousness to come through. That is my interpretation. Read the book if you're so inclined. This isn't something I would mass recommend to everybody. It might not be everybody's cup of tea, but if this is something that you're interested in and you have an open mind and a free mind, please do check it out. But in the book, the author, Robert, he talked about and he chronicles Timothy Leary's experiences through jail. I did not know this guy was jailed multiple times, and I've read like loads of books on LSD, on about Ram Dass and things like that. This guy was like persecuted by the United States government. By, I would argue, probably driven by NPCs whose their intelligence or their programming was sought to basically make it so that this world increases suffering. And here he was coming through. And it's argued that he was a predecessor, or he is a reincarnation of Gurdjieff, another mystic that I've mentioned several times on this podcast. I didn't know, I wasn't even aware of that, about that connection. That all of these guys, even Alan Watts, Timothy Leary, Carl Jung, Aldous Huxley are all mentioned in the same sentence as Aleister Crowley. Yeah, that Aleister Crowley, that guy. Very fascinating book. But Leary was imprisoned. This guy was a genius. I mean, he was a professor at Harvard, very intelligent man, perfectly sane, and they put him in prison. And he was there doing work from prison. And it made me think of like how there are some people, some souls who just keep coming back here. And what this world, I don't call this world a prison. I do think it's something that we do come in to serve time, but it can't feel prison-esque, right? Like school. Every time I talk to certain people about school, they always say something like they hated school. Now, school's not a prison. It's a program. Right? So the simulation is not a prison, it's a program, but it can feel like a prison. And they literally put Leary in prison, but he was this like super aware being, and he just kept trying to wake people up. And even the people in the prison, he was able to, by him being there, work, but still wake people up and to show them that you don't have to suffer. You can still generate energy by other means. And I think that he's an excellent, let's call him a patron saint of some souls who come down. Some people call them star seeds, which is funny because, funny enough, I just realized that in the book, he was actually one of the originators of the idea of star seed. It was his baby. So once again, if you're interested, if the names Alan Watts, Aldous Huxley, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, if those people pop out to you, the book is called Cosmic Triggers 1 by Robert Anton Wilson. I would strongly recommend it. Not for everybody. You know, if you're a scary kind of person, it's not your shtick. I would leave that be for when you are a little bit more open, comfortable, right? And even if you're uncomfortable, sometimes things exist that you need to check out outside of your comfort level. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm reviewing my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. Yep, got that. Yep, got that. Sorry, excuse me. This is very important. I'm glad I wrote this down. Anything in the third dimension that is in 3D form that claims to be your creator is a liar. So some people channel spirits. I actually read in that same book, Cosmic Triggers, he was saying how they had encountered or channeled through cosmic telepathy or interplanetary telepathy, entities in a different solar system sending information, channeling information through mediums and such, saying that they created us. It's time for humanity to go, to build our spaceships and travel through space and come back home to them. Now, my thought process is this. Imagine a sim telling another sim that they created them. Bitch, we're in here together. What the fuck are you talking about? You're me. So any alien that comes that we can see in 3-dimensional form that tries to tell us that they created us, Be super leery of that. That makes no sense. If this is a shadow world, then anything in this dimension would also be in here alongside with us, serving the same function. They might have figured out ways to generate energy that's not like the way we're generating energy here. But bear in mind, like I would not maybe recommend that we just take some information. Now, this is real talk. These are things we need to be talking about because shit's about to get really weird. You're hearing this now. I'm telling you, shit in this reality is about to get super, super fucking weird, even weirder than it's been. Okay. But if a civilization is blasting information through space, telling us that they created us and that we need to build our spaceships and travel to them, it's giving trap. It's feeling trappy. If you created us, why are you sending a message? Why don't you come here then? Why do you want us to travel to you? That's weird. That's a weird vibe. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like a trap. Like, we're going to get there and it's like they're going to eat us. Because once again, you can't exist in the third dimension in the simulation, in the false construct, right? And then also have created us, right? And why would I have to travel to you? Does that make sense? If you exist in this, if you are another planet within the game, right? Like, to use a World of Warcraft analogy, imagine if like the undead told the trolls that the undead created them. Like, how? No, they're all the same. They're all programmed by humans outside of the game, outside of the 2D world of World of Warcraft and Azeroth. And but whoever's saying that to each other, that's a lie. It's giving traps. So be mindful. Not everything that, sends information, to the receptor that is your brain, that your brain picks up, is benevolent. Not everything that's light is good. Not everything that's dark is bad. So just keep that in mind. All right, enough of that. I'm going to leave you guys with a bit of like information regarding plant medicine. Black seed oil is great for colds. There's been a cold bug that's been going around for the last couple of years or so. Super strong, kind of stopped the entire world. What's great for colds that I have found in my personal experience for preventing colds, I take this as the first sign of a cold or a cough. Black seed oil. Gaia is a great brand. I get it from Amazon or wherever you get vitamins. I think iHerb is great as well. Walmart, wherever. Support wherever you want to support, local grocery store. But Gaia black seed oil, like, you can look, go on Google and search it up and see the benefits of it. It's great. Another, like, a sanitizer that I'd recommend is called Hypochlorous Acid, Hypochlorous acid. I learned about this from my dentist. They actually utilized it as a mouthwash at the height of, all the stuff that was going on in the last 2 years or whatever. It's like similar to bleach, but it's not. It's super skin safe. It's a great sanitizer. You can actually use it to sanitize like your produce as well, because there've been like E. coli outbreaks, shit like that. So it's great for that. I use my eye doctor also told me about it. Funny enough, so my dentist uses it as a rinse. And my eye doctor rather had recommended it because I was getting like blurry vision, but I was also using a lot of eyeliner, and he was saying how like, well, that was what was causing it, was that I needed to clean my eyeliner because it was introducing bacteria to my eye. So he got me this spray, and I sprayed it, and it smelled a little bit like bleach. And I was like, is it bleach? And he's like, no, it's hypochlorous, not hypochloric. Hypochlorous, O-U-S is important. Hypochlorous acid. And they had a spray bottle that he like sold to me for like $20. And then I went on Amazon and found like a fucking gallon of the same thing for like $20. And I use that for everything. I have like a spray bottle that I mix. It's like half hypochlorous acid and half like witch hazel. And I spray it on like a little pad, and I use it on my face after I wash my makeup out of my face. And I no longer get like ingrown hairs. I used to get ingrown hairs like the side of my face for some weird fucking reason. And I use it now before I go to bed and first thing in the morning, and I no longer get that. You can also use it like for sanitary needs. Like I think people, when they use the bathroom, they just use like dry ass toilet paper to wipe their butts. I don't like that. Like other countries, they have bidets for that reason, because that's not going to clean you. So what I've done once again is I use the same sort of mixture, more hypochlorous acid than witch hazel, but I mix that together. And witch hazel is an excellent anti-inflammatory, and some people have reported that it also helps for like other things. Like it's a great toner, things like that. But I mix that two together, and that's a spray bottle I keep right next to my toilet. And when I use the bathroom, I spray that on my toilet paper, and that's what I use to wipe my butt. So I just want to share that with you guys. I just like sharing information that I picked out, while I'm in the game, that might be of benefit to you. Oh, one last thing. People keep asking me why my teeth are super white. There's a brand called Luelli. Luelli. These are not ads, by the way. I'm just sharing information. Nobody's paying me for this information. And I promise you, the only ads going forward that I hope to... I don't make a living from this podcast. Nobody's paying me. That's why you guys don't have any ads. But what I will be doing in the future is I want to put out a book. I'm working on it right now. So if you guys would support me in that manner, I would really appreciate it. And it would be a book that you guys would enjoy, obviously. So there's that. But I used it lately. I went to my dentist and I was having like bleeding gums. I'm just telling you guys all my business. Anyway, and so she recommended like particular type of peroxide gel. It's like cal something peroxide, but she wanted to charge me like $500 for that, and I was like, no, thank you. So I went and found this online, and it basically is the same thing as what she was trying to charge me $500 for. I mean, she's got to make her money. It's fine. And I use it it's actually a teeth whitener. But you know how they just take the same thing and then like they mark it up, whatever. But I use it to whiten my teeth a couple times a week. And I also use it in between my gums. So I have like one of those picks that you use to floss. And I put the gel in between or on the pick with a little floss stick on there. And I use it in between my gums, particularly like one that was like prone to inflammation, and that stopped it. And so like last time I went to her, she's like, wow, your gums are really healthy. And I was like, thank you. So I don't have to get like the laser treatments anymore, because I don't know what the long-term effects of that is. So if you are experiencing issues like that, and you are just like maybe even you're waiting till I get to the dentist or something like that, I would recommend that. The side effects is you can also apply it to your teeth. It specifically is made for teeth whitening. So you apply it to your teeth and it whitens your teeth. And I think there's nothing sexier than like, bright white teeth. And then I also make my own toothpaste, TMI or not, I don't know, and share it with you. But I mix Hello toothpaste. You can get it from wherever. They have a fluoride-free peppermint version, and I mix that with MCT oil. Sidebar, MCT oil is great for candida. If you struggle with that, I take a bit of it and I mix it in with the Luelli tooth. I'm sorry, not the Luelli, brain fart. I've been talking for a while. So I take MCT oil as I use the Hello toothpaste, the fluoride-free one. It's white and it says fluoride-free and it's peppermint. I use that as a base. I add organic MCT oil to it. I add a bit of baking soda, a bit of calcium carbonate, and a bit of bentonite clay. And I mix it all up together, and that is my toothpaste. I add like a couple of drops of peppermint oil. But the MCT oil is great if you have like white tongue. Just MCT oil by itself, you brush your tongue with that, your tongue will be pink. But if you mix all that together, you can make your own toothpaste, and it's great for your teeth. So I want to share that with you guys as well. It's something that I do. I'm not telling you guys to do it. I'm just telling you that's something that I do and I enjoy doing. And I've noticed great results on my teeth. And and you can actually drink the MCT oil. The label says to take 3 tablespoons a day. I would not recommend that unless you're like trying to like do a flush. And by flush, I mean like a colon cleanse, because you take 3 tablespoons a day and you are going to empty your bowels. Which, if that's what you're trying to do, go for it. Because I don't think we should be walking around with like copious amounts of feces in our bodies every day. But you do that first thing in the morning and then chug like water after, that's going to empty your bowels. I would not recommend that unless that is your intent. I'm just saying that is something that you should be aware of that it does. Okay, so you guys hear how I'm trying to dancing around what cannot and can say. But I personally will take like 1 tablespoon a day, 1 to 2, and I found that it has helped heal my gut. So yeah, just bits of information that I want to share. I just decided I'd start sharing with you guys because why not? So that's it. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe to the YouTube, please do. Want to be putting sort of like longer form videos. I had a video that I actually posted on my YouTube under the folder or the playlist of like YouTube's exclusive. I was talking about that carnivore doctor that's telling people not to eat their veggies and stuff. So I did a little talk on that. So I want to do more of that. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And I wish you one last thing. If you have in your mind, there's somebody that you've been thinking about. I'm being told to share this. Don't know who's telling me this. Maybe my own self, my higher self, my consciousness, my non-filtered by the brain self is telling me to share this because somebody needs this information. Listen, there's a voice in your head that tells you to do things. Like, for example, there's somebody that you cut out of your life that's probably toxic. Now the voice in your head is telling you to reach out to them. Please understand that you cannot control your thoughts, right? Because it would require you to think them before you think them. There's a book called Free Will by Sam Harris, worth a read, but he talks about that. So we are told to identify with our thoughts. We are told that we are our thoughts, but that is what increases suffering. Because if you think that you're the thought, then you would just go with what the thought suggests, right? So you think that that's you. But meditation will teach you that that's not your thought. That's not you generating those thoughts, right? Because if you sit, for example, to meditate, let's say you want to meditate on a mantra or on your breath or something like that. If you sit to do that, and then all of a sudden you hear your mind talking about something else, well, you set a function. The function was, I'm going to sit for 20 minutes and I'm going to repeat this mantra. Then why is this voice distracting you from what you said you're going to do? So what meditation teaches you is that voice in your head, that monkey mind, that's not you. And the way I've defined it is it's the intelligence of this avatar. Right? That you have been programmed to identify with. It's not you. Okay? So I want to leave you with this. 2 things. 1, if there's a voice in your head that's telling you to reach out to somebody that you cut out of your life because they were exhibiting toxic behavior, please understand that if that voice in your head can be put in your head to tell you to reach out to them, and if it's telling you that person really is actually the person that you're supposed to be with, right? Please understand that the voice in your head can put that same thought into their head and make them reach out to you. Why do you have to reach out to them? Why do you have to be the one to reach out? Especially if I'm not saying that they're toxic people. Please avoid toxic people. Okay, but there are people, if it's a person who has exhibited toxic behavior in the past and you cut them off because of their behavior, and now you're trying to relink with them because of your internal monologue, understand that if it's, quote, meant to be, then their internal monologue can also be inputted with information. I don't know if that's the right word, but they can also have access to information to make them reach out to you. So how come they haven't reached out to you? All right? Just be mindful, because sometimes the suggestions of your internal monologue tend to increase suffering in order to generate that loosh energy that Robert Monroe was talking about. And like they keep telling us on TikTok and on YouTube and Instagram, stop doing the most. You don't have to do the most. If your job is just to come here and serve time, okay, we're going to struggle. That's part of existing in this dimension, is that you have to struggle and serve your time. You don't have to suffer. And the internal monologue, it will, if you identify with it, it will put you in situations that will increase your suffering. And a friend of mine, she said to me, and it was very good. She said, you don't have to suffer for a gift. So if you're looking at an individual that you're interacting with and you believe that that's a gift from, quote, God, then why would you need to suffer? If you have to suffer for it, then it's not a gift, right? If I said, I'm going to give you $50, this is your birthday present, but I need you to run up and down the hill before I give you this $50. That's not a gift. You're working for that $50. So then that's not a gift from God. That's something else happening. Right? It's just something wants to see you suffer. I need you to sit with that. Thanks for listening.